Dreams are another dimension, Bobby. Can you grasp it? You know, like, Freddy Krueger.
I'll be ready by the time you're dressed.
I am dressed.
Both mutant aggression and anti-terrorism statutes operate outside the dictates of due process. Now, your daughter's public outburst was technically an act of mutant terrorism.
Welcome, everyone. This is episode 8 of the Comics in Motion podcast. I am one co-host, Chris Phelps, and I'll pass you over to my other co-host, Mr. Dave Horrocks.
Hi, guys. Welcome to the Comics in Motion podcast. What we like to do here is we like to review media like movies, TV shows, games that are based on comic books. Myself, I'm looking at the media from the perspective of a long-time comic book reader. And my co-host Chris there is reviewing purely from that media perspective without the baggage of being that comic book reader. So between the two of us, when we're walking through these recaps, these reviews, we kind of think that this will spark off some interesting conversations. So we've been enjoying it on the way, and we hope you are too. So, Chris, again, another great week in terms of some of the feedback we've had. It seems like Batman 1989 is still quite popular out there.
Yeah, and I've been quite surprised. We were just talking before we come on that the response on social media, this film still sticks with a lot of people in there. And like I said to you, the sort of Hell's Kitchen that I give it, the more I've listened to people this week, I think it's become more unpopular if they listen to the podcast, because even I was listening back thinking, I don't know whether it caught me on an off night or stuff. And you mentioned something quite good, actually, that few people really stuck with him, what the comic origins were and everything, you know, and regarding some of the facts, what they meant to them. So I think listening back, you said something to me like, you've not really got much more, you know, much room to go when we review stuff like Batman and Robin and that. And I think you could be right, but I'm sticking by it for the time being. But yeah, it's just been great. A great journey so far. 8 episodes in, and it's just, I can't believe how fast we've grown, Dave. I really can't.
Yeah, and I must admit, so I had to listen back to the podcast, and yeah, I think it was the last half hour that kind of destroyed the movie for you, wasn't it? And yeah. But the bit that really made me chuckle was, you know, in all seriousness, your suggestion to make Tom Selleck the Batman. And so, listening back while I was editing, I think I laughed at the time, but listening back, I was in stitches. And so we had a little bit of a back and forth, didn't we? And we didn't think of it at the time, but we sort of came up with this Bat Magnum. Yeah. And because the thing that stood out to me, all I could think of was the tash. You know, just one of the most distinctive tashes you've got in the 80s. And sure enough, I got a picture of him, stuck a Batman mask on. And it's just Tom Selleck with a Batman mask on. So every time I keep going back to that picture, I just laugh.
It was the thing was though, David. Like obviously, I'm sort of reading from a script as such, because you go in and finding stuff like Wikipedia. Google's always your friend with this sort of thing, especially in this day and age. You know, and like we do with anything, you've got to research it and watch YouTube videos, stuff like that, and it mirrored so much the Superman stuff about all these people were offered it and turned it down or auditioned for it and didn't get the job. And even when I listened back, I mean, I was travelling in my work van, and then all of a sudden I absolutely burst out laughing. I had to pull over when you were like Tom Selleck, and it just, you know, it's like, I suppose it validates the fact that I pretty much don't know what to do when it comes to reviewing, because it's like, but people were going, Tom Selleck, is he real? You know?
So, I mean, did you pick that up from, you know, was he actually genuinely linked, or was that
he was.
Just oh, right, okay. I wasn't sure if that was just your own suggestion there. You know, even, I mean, Cesar Romero sort of famously wouldn't get rid of his tash, would he? But at least he's got the Joker makeup, so you could kind of, if you're squinting from a long distance from the back of the TV room or something, you might not spot it. But But yeah, it'd be tough to get away without that, Tash. But anyway, so that was obviously last week's episode. We had a lot of fun, and like I say, it's obvious from the social media that people obviously think quite fondly of that still now. So yeah, having great feedback. Don't have a 5-star review to read out this week, which is a shame, but hopefully if you guys can get on that and get onto iTunes and give us a 5-star review there, that'd be great. We'll read it out on the show, and that helps us just boost up the rankings there and get hopefully up those search algorithms and help grow the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So what we wanted to do this week is, cards on the table. So in terms of comic book background, I think the X-Men is probably the number one for me. In terms of just being a young kid and then getting older. I did drop out of comics for years, and then, I've gone back and reread some of those stories that I missed. So I was quite keen that at some point we tackle that X-Men universe.
Yeah.
Or rather the Fox-owned X-Men universe. And most people tend to think of that X-Men 2000 movie as being the start of that Fox universe, but there was a little-known kind of Fox TV movie that came out a few years earlier than that, so not long after they got the rights, and obviously before this movie came out in 2000. So I was quite keen, so I had seen it. Not at the time. I'm not even sure if it had a UK airing, to be honest.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be surprised if it didn't. But I'd seen it, and I thought, well, seeing as I've suffered this, I'll make you, Chris. I'll make you suffer it as well. But for me, it really is the start of that Fox X-Men universe. So being a completionist as well, I kind of wanted to go back and start that, which, Chris, I'm sure you're going to thank me for. Yeah.
I mean, the film we're actually reviewing is Generation X, and oh boy, have we reviewed it this week. Now, as a team together, we obviously can't, as we both said after a couple of episodes, we can't keep reviewing films and giving them, what's Asgard and things like that. You can't keep doing that. But this has been up there, and it's actually given me, before we get into the review, a more of a love for Mr. Hasselhoff as Nick Fury. I think I may have been a bit harsh on the Hoff there with my review of Nick Fury. And I certainly, as I've mentioned briefly before, I'm certainly going to have to think about the review last week of Batman, because it's just... Anyway, I know we're going to get into it in the review, but as you can tell from the offset, Dave, as a true friend, has decided that he wants to put me through what can only be described as this living hell. And here is our review for this week, because, Dave, I'm loving to hear what you've got on the comic book side of things.
So let me go into the comic book background. I will say that this does actually score on IMDB. It scores higher than Nick Fury Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which I was a bit surprised about, to be honest, because I think, we'll get into the review there. It's down at the bottom of the barrel, it's just scraping it out there. So let's get into a bit of comics background then. So Generation X was effectively a spin-off from the main Uncanny X-Men title back in the mid-90s, with a team of younger mutants. Now, they'd had this similar kind of idea back in the early 80s with a book called The New Mutants. So X-Men were originally created back in the 60s, and then that original team was replaced by the kind of second generation of X-Men with giant size. So that's when you got introduced to the likes of Wolverine, Colossus, Storm, all that lot. And then, like I say, this New Mutants book came out, and that was not a team of adults who all had mastery over their powers. This was about kids who were just, they'd just been introduced to their powers, and they didn't really have control of them, certainly not mastery of them. So Generation X was a very similar idea to that. Now, Generation X was not the only spin-off. So around the 90s, and it was kind of an interesting time for Marvel, and a lot of people don't really look too favorably back at it, because it just, the whole comic book industry kind of imploded a little bit. You started to get, big money going for the, some of the golden and silver age comics. And then everyone went a little bit nuts. So everything, all the comics, you had the characters with big shoulder pads, massive guns and what have you. Actual guns, not arms guns. But the arms guns as well. And it all just got a bit greedy, and you had lots and lots of X titles kind of coming out. So anything with X in, there was X Factor. It actually came out sort of late 90s, but late 80s, coming into the 90s. X Force, which we're actually going to see introduced in Deadpool 2 by the look of the trailer. And like there's various titles, Extinction, Resurrection, lots of things with X in anyway.
Yeah.
Now, the biggest difference between Generation X and, say, the New Mutants was more that New Mutants were still being taught by Charles Xavier at his mansion there, whereas Generation X, they were being taught by Emma Frost, who, originally was a bit of a villain, certainly to the New Mutants as well, and she had strong ties with the Hellfire Club there. And also Banshee, who's a little bit of a stalwart X-Men, so X-Man, he's quite often on the periphery of the team. And so those two actually heading up and teaching the students made Generation X a little bit different there.
Yeah.
And again, instead of setting up in Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters back over in New York, these guys were over at Massachusetts Academy. So again, a little bit different there, and some of the characters that you had there, some of them we see in this movie. So Jubilee, and Jubilee had been around since I think it was Uncanny 244-ish. I think it was 244 actually, and she was obviously. She hadn't been around that long before she made her debut she was kind of a point of view character in the X-Men animated series in the early 90s. And so she kind of gained popularity, I think, through that. But she was in this Generation X team. You also had Monet, and Mondo and Skin, who we see in this movie, along with some other characters that we don't see as well. Of the characters that we don't see, there's characters like Chamber, like Husk. They're kind of cool characters, but what they all have in common is they all have kind of powers that seem very difficult to shoot or expensive to shoot. So I think that's why they kind of parked off some of those characters and created Buff and Refrax. So I think Buff, just add a sweatshirt and there you go, you've got a mutant power there. And Refrax, I was trying to figure out, are they kind of toying, are they prototyping the idea of introducing Cyclops?
Yeah.
I couldn't really figure out, but quite often, sometimes what you'll see is if a character's introduced, say in the movies, in cartoons or whatever, if they're popular, they'll eventually get added to the comics as well.
Yeah,
I haven't seen before Refrax since without a trace.
Yeah,
but so Generation X, it ran from 94 to around 2001. So it ran for 75 issues, which isn't a bad run for a kind of spin-off title. But in the early 2000s, kind of Joe Quesada came in and gave Marvel a little bit of a shake-up and a shakedown, and Generation X Volume 1 at least was one of those to get the chop.
Yeah.
In terms of, normally at this point, as I say, recommended reading, this is not particularly one of my favourite titles. So I'll say issues of note rather than recommended reading. But I mean, if you've got access to, obviously, if you've got the issues, if you've got access to the online digital comics through Marvel Unlimited or Comixology, go on and have a look at Uncanny X-Men 318. That's kind of a prelude issue to the Generation X series, and then Generation X1 as well. And so if you read those first few issues, and if you like it, obviously carry on there. And that's it for comic book background. So Chris, do you want to? I'm really looking forward to this one. Do you want to give us a bit of background on the movie?
Not really, but
that was the wrong question, wasn't it? Can you please do that instead of would you like to?
Yeah, this is your segment, Chris. At least give us something. No, the film first aired on the 20th of February 96. It was directed by Jack Sholder. It was sort of like Fox were testing the waters on whether they were going to run sort of these comic book superhero film series, and let's just say it didn't test very well. It's quite funny, really, because as you were watching the film, there's certain things, and I watched this, and we both said the same thing, and the actual mansion that's used in the film is actually from X-Men 2000, X-Men 2, X-Men Last Stand, and I thought this, I'm a massive Smallville fan. The actual mansion's used in Smallville. It's the Luthor mansion as well, and it's also in Arrow. So it has got sort of comic book origins. It's obviously a very good setting. So that's where it all sort of ties in with some of the settings look quite familiar.
And just, sorry to cut across you there, but I noticed that as well. And then I thought, for me, it's in continuity. That's it.
Yeah.
The X-Men universe, the Fox X-Men universe, so I'm having it. That's continuity.
Yeah.
Bad wig and all.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, terrible wig. But yeah, I agree. It's a strange production-wise. Like you said before, they actually created, it was one of my sort of things, they created Buff was to replace Husk, and obviously Refrax was to replace Chamber, and it was purely a budget thing, which says it all really about the film, because they couldn't afford the CGI or anything or whatever was available at the time, and this sort of impacted the whole inception of the film, even down to some of the fans, because these, like you said, they do create these characters to maybe put them into the comics later down the line if they're successful, but there was obviously a reason that we never saw these characters again. And the guy, I actually thought it was Cyclops at first when I first started watching it, because I'd gone into the film blind. So it's interesting, these new characters
blind as well.
Yeah, I always turned away. The only thing with the TV stuff, because I've struggled this week with this one to get a lot of the information regarding this, is it's just to concentrate on one of the main characters, Matt Frewer, who plays Dr. Russell Tresh. He's one of the main. He is pretty much the main guy in the film, to be honest. But he's done a lot of stuff regarding sort of comic books and that, and he's done a lot of voiceover acting for like the Batman series, Incredible Hulk. He's been in some comic book films as well, some that we'll probably watch at some point. We've got The Watchmen, Supergirl. Mm-hmm. He's been in Pixels, which we know obviously isn't based really on the comic book world, but it's something that we spoke about, myself and you, Dave. And then in 2018, he's played Carnage, which I haven't watched yet, in that Altered Carbon on Netflix. But his main character, and I kept thinking when I was watching it, where do we recognise this guy from? He was Max Headroom.
Oh yeah,
in the 80s.
How can you not know that?
No, I didn't even twig. So it's just, I just thought I'd throw that in there with him, because he's a very, very interesting character when you watch this film. So I just thought he deserved a bit extra on the side.
So I was going to talk about it when we got to the walkthrough, but let's just touch on it a bit now, because I have seen him in that Altered Carbon, and he plays a pretty creepy, scary bloke. And like you say, Max Headroom, I thought he was quite good in Watchmen as well. So when you watch this movie back, I mean, again, it's a 96 movie, isn't it? This is at the height of Jim Carrey popularity.
Yeah.
And as soon as he bursts onto screen, I'm just thinking, right, again, very clearly budget constrained, but clearly the writers are thinking Jim Carrey. Yeah. Or, maybe it's the director telling him just Jim Carrey this up, or maybe it's Matt Frewer himself. whatever the input to it was, I just felt like he was trying to be Jim Carrey at that time.
Yeah, and obviously he's Canadian as well, so his origins are around Jim Carrey. Dave, it's the first thing I've written down, as I keep saying in my notes, but I was absolutely blown away. If anybody hasn't watched the film, and whatever we reviewed the score, at least watch the first maybe 20 minutes of it, just if you can watch it, just to see his performance, because I've never seen anyone. He was literally watching like a skit that you'd see on something like Saturday Night Live or something on YouTube, someone actually just parodying, like you see on Graham Norton's show in the UK, and there'll be like a lot of actors on, and they'll go, when they're promoting a film, they'll go, oh, like him who plays Doctor Strange, and they'll be like, he's really good at impressions. So he's great at different actors, does and that's what it was like. It's like he was asked to do a film impression of Jim Carrey. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, Matt, we wanted Jim Carrey, but Ace Ventura and The Mask have already come out, so we've got you. Can you be Jim Carrey, please?
Yeah. I was absolutely, I must admit, Dave, I was absolutely shocked by I know we're going to get into it in the review, but I just thought he deserved this little bit of a section, because it's just a wow, and a wow for totally the wrong reasons. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. But let's, if you want to get into it, Dave, let's get into it.
Yeah, so let's go through the main kind of plot points then. In terms of the introduction, we get to see this very badly lit operating theatre kind of thing. So we can see by the guys, what has he got, little claws or something on there? You can see the guy who's strapped down is a mutant of some kind, and the guys who are around him clearly want to get into his brain, and it's going to have some nasty consequences there. It's going to have a pretty bad headache, I'd imagine. And Beth, and they get stopped. You get introduced very quickly to Emma Frost, and she's got some guys flanking her, and basically they tell Matt Frewer's character, so this Dr. Russell Tresh, who also he's made up for the movie. He doesn't exist in the comics at all. There's a character, Trask, and I was trying to think, are they trying to base it on him? But probably not. And they give him a jolly good ticking off and tell him he's not allowed to work at the university anymore. And I thought, well, that's a bit of a let off, really, isn't it? Considering they were about to murder this mutant. But I guess it quickly puts you into a world. So, and this is, a lot of what the X-Men comics are around this idea of minorities, and the fact that it's this X gene that they have. It's the next step in evolution, and then you have people who, the Homo sapiens, trying to manipulate that and use it for their own purposes. So he's obviously, I can't remember what it was called, but he's trying to get into a particular part of the brain to take that out so he can use it himself. And so the fact that he's not really going to get brought to justice. So Emma Frost is quite annoyed at this, and then we see, I guess it's kind of like telekinetic type powers, so the lights dim a bit, and there's a bit of wind there. You can see there's a guy with a fan, probably some intern with a fan blowing a wig quite badly there. And I was a bit puzzled, because so Emma Frost is not a telekinetic; she's a telepath. And we obviously don't see any of those type of powers in the comics, but we don't see it again in the movie.
No,
she just kind of makes the lights dim a bit, makes things shake around a bit, and then she's like,
yeah,
and walks off.
Well, I must admit, at the first 15 minutes of the film, and this scene in particular, I couldn't work out whether she's obviously rescues this guy who's got like these sort of bird claws or whatever he's got. He's a mutant, but I couldn't work out why she was so angry. And you get this in the few scenes of her. I couldn't work out whether she was a baddie. I just couldn't work it out with her. And that whole things she did, and obviously it's that the Dr. Russell, she were introduced to him. It just didn't make. I always say it. I say it every week, and I listen back to the podcast and say the same thing. But it just didn't make sense. I was like, I don't get it. I honestly don't get what's that going to do. Just it's knocked him over. What power in the long run? What does that actually do to somebody other than just like sort of sitting down for a minute because it's a bit away? I just couldn't get it. I didn't get it at all. At that point, Dave, I sort of thought, oh no, and started looking at the clock, thinking, oh dear. I'd not checked IMDB. I'd not checked Rotten Tomatoes. I'd not checked anything. And I know you alluded to a couple of things in our messages, and oh my word, that's all I can say. And the one thing I've missed as we go to the next scene, she leaves the room. Dr. Russell, he's giving this mean look as if to say, I'll get you next time, Gadget. And it comes up, I didn't notice it when I first walked through, it's 5 years later, innit, after this sort of incident, and we come to introduce to Skin with his family.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you're saying there, again, because I'm coming into this. So it's Generation X. I know what the comic book background is. I know who Emma Frost is. I know mutants are quite often persecuted. But listening to your feedback there, you're right. I mean, it doesn't really do a good job of introducing who's who. I don't think, because sometimes with the storytelling, they can introduce that a little bit later, can't they? Yeah, quite often at the beginning of films, you don't quite know what's going on. But I'm trying to think now. I don't know if it really does that later in the film either.
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, as well, it was like we had the B team, because I'm thinking, is she supposed to be Storm? And she, obviously she's not Storm, but you've got this terrible blonde wig on, which is absolutely atrocious. It looks like a Barbie doll's wig. It's just awful. And again, there's very much similarities with what she's wearing to what Viper wears in Nick Fury, because we're going down the route of sort of Ann Summers type dresses as the film goes on. It gets more revealing.
So it's interesting you say that. Are you familiar with Emma Frost at all?
No.
Okay. Have you seen X-Men First Class?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So she's in that.
Right, okay.
The January Jones plays there. I don't think that was particularly great. I'll send you some comic book images after the show, maybe. But I actually think for most of the movie, she was quite overdressed compared to what she is in the comics.
Oh, right, okay.
But you would not be able to get, I don't think, you would not be able to get away on any medium with what she wears in the comics. On any, on any movie or TV show. I don't think. Right, okay. Even in the cartoons, she's dressed up a bit more. But yeah, awful wig. Really terrible wig, wasn't it? And I think the Storm thing, again, it's because of that opening scene, isn't it? I think where you got the wind blowing and whatever. I can see why you'd think that. Yeah,
it's strange.
But yeah, so getting back then, so you mentioned we meet Skin.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's saying bye to his family, and again, so Skin is from the comics. He's more kind of greyish in the comics, but I just again, you kind of have you ever seen? There was a Fantastic Four movie that never was released, a Roger Corman movie, and it was never intended to be released, so it's quite controversial. Have you ever seen any of that? Okay, no. Again, we'll have to revisit that one in the future, but just awful special effects. And part of this opening scene with Skin kind of reminds me of that. So, he's saying bye to his family and whatever, and they drive off, and then you get this kind of gut-wrenching sort of scream, and you're like, what's happening there? And his little sister's still got hold of his hand, and the car's driving further and further away, and she's obviously got hold of his hand, and it's stretching right out there. But it's quite painful for him. Yeah. And I thought, God, his sister looks like a real sociopath. She was holding his hand, and she just, for me, just had a really scary look in her eye. Because Armando's like screaming in pain, and she's just got that deadpan look at her. Did you notice?
Yeah, I did.
It's like, that you wouldn't want to mess with her. It's like, come and see my dead animals in the back. Yeah, that was a bit freaky.
Yeah, well, I thought also as well the vehicle that his dad, or whoever it is, taking him obviously to Professor Xavier's school, was a bit out of context. It's sort of like a 1950s vehicle, pickup truck sort of thing. I mean, obviously, you know my views on American cars. I love stuff like that, but I don't know. I just, a little thing I'd seen with the continuity, thinking that's just sort of so random that they're in these sort of suits up. They look like brand new off the production line.
Yes, and it's funny you say about the 50s there, because, you know, so this is Generation X. Now, apart from the fact that it's a spin-off and Marvel was putting anything with X in the title basically together as a mini-series or spin-off title. So Generation X gained popularity just in the mainstream media, didn't it, to describe that MTV generation, so kind of after the baby boomers generation. So this is like, you know, people born around, I think, is it late 60s to late 70s, somewhere around that, but basically us, we're Generation X, aren't we?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of things in this movie that it seems like Grease 2 or something. It seems like it seems like it should be set in the 50s.
Yeah,
and I'll come back to that point in a bit when we get a bit further into the movie. But I hadn't noticed the car, but I can see it in my mind's eye now that you mention it.
Yeah, it's just a little spot. And then I know we want to concentrate on Jubilee, but the one thing I just wanted to go to is the next scene. Obviously, from when Skin goes off is Dr. Russell, and he's with this guy Bobby, who's obviously sort of like part of the company who was funding this, you know, crazy doctor as we get introduced. And this is where he goes full Jim Carrey at this point. This is when it went up, because I didn't notice he was like this in the first scene, because we just see him sort of getting reprimanded for experiment on this guy, and I suppose it's supposed to depict that 5 years later he's just gone loopy because of this experimenting and stuff. But he says something, Dave, and I don't know if you picked up on this, and I'm thinking we're going to have to look into this. He mentions about alpha waves again, and I was thinking,
oh right, he's trying to find Superman, is he?
Yeah, I don't know, a Lex Luthor or something, but I know it's only a brief scene, but I just picked up on it straight away, thinking alpha waves. There's something in this I'm totally missing. Because it's mentioned in it, and obviously it's Marvel, not DC, but it was just a weird little thing. It don't mean anything. It might be totally irrelevant to the whole thing. But
I don't know. It kind of sounds sciencey, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You know, I didn't pick up on that, to be honest, but I sort of say in jest that it sort of sounds sciencey, but I'm pretty confident that's the answer.
Yeah, I'll go with you with that. But but obviously we go to an arcade machine. We go to an arcade, and he's obviously looking for mutants, isn't he, at this point, because it's sort of like he needs people to sort of experiment on, and we get introduced to Jubilee playing an arcade machine, absolutely going mental, isn't she?
Yeah, and they don't make arcades like they used to, do they? Despite the movie and everything, that scene, I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. All the sort of machines are on top of each other pretty much. One of the things I noticed is Virtual Fighter gets mentioned an awful lot in this movie. I'm not sure if there are a few backhanders or whatever there, but that's what she's playing, isn't she? She's playing a bit of Virtual Fighter.
Yeah, and it's Sega. It's a Sega. And then also when Dr. Russell's there, or Russell, I suppose we should call him, over his right-hand shoulder, it's an X-Men arcade machine, because you see the old yellow logo. Yeah. I didn't see it, but in reading up on it, I did see that that's one of the Easter eggs there. Yeah. So,
but so again, a bit weird. The universe is very small, isn't it? You know, apparently he's pushing out all these subliminal messages through the arcade machines, and apparently mutants can actually see them. So Jubilee sees this subliminal message, and he just happens to be right there in the same arcade as well. But one of the themes of these younger mutants is they don't really have great control of their powers. And actually in the very first episode of the animated series, we meet Jubilee, and she's in the arcade as well. So I wasn't sure if that was a bit of an homage, or, like I say, maybe coincidence. So I'm thinking probably more of an homage to the animated series there.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, she loses control of her powers, and we see, it didn't look great. We see some kind of fireworks going off there, and so Trish sort of notices.
Hold on, Dave. Yeah. We see some fireworks. Yeah, that just sums it up.
They weren't great, were they? But she obviously gets found out that she's a mutant there, and hauled off to jail. Yeah.
And we get Dave, which we both picked up on immediately, because we get she meets her mother, doesn't she? And we have this sort of dialogue between the two, and the mother just doesn't really care about her, to be honest. She doesn't seem that bothered.
And again, so what do you think of that reaction from the mother?
I don't know. I know, obviously, when you watch the later stuff and things like that, obviously I can only go off the movie stuff I've seen. It's more that the families are more embarrassed, aren't they, and sort of absolutely distraught that one of them is a mutant, because they've not realised the others are just normal humans. And then you'll get the odd one who's a mutant, especially in sort of like X-Men 3, when it becomes apparent with a couple of the characters that the families didn't know and stuff, or there's a couple of them within the family and they're hiding it. But I don't know. It just didn't really make much sense. It was just very blasé the way the one was, if I'm being honest. It wasn't convincing.
Yeah. So it's a bit of a theme, and I guess you've got the hindsight of seeing the later X-Men movies as well, but it is a bit of a theme in the comics. I remember seeing an interview with Stan Lee, and the main reason he created the X-Men was because he was getting a bit tired of having to think up different origins for characters.
Yeah.
So, you couldn't have everyone kind of somehow be exposed to gamma radiation, or get hit by a truck with radioactive waste in there, or bit by a radioactive spider. So he just had this idea, genius really. They were just born that way. And the X was just, for extra. They've got something extra about them. So, just that idea, you could just suddenly say, and typically through the comics, they're not born mutants, or they don't display their powers when they're first born. It's more of a thing that happens when they go through puberty. So, around about that age, that's when they come into their powers. And one of the things that drew me to the X-Men as well was this idea that, well, Spider-Man, unless you're J. Jonah Jameson, I guess, you're a hero.
Yes.
And, despite not destroying buildings and all that sort of stuff, people celebrate these heroes. Yet the mutants, who seem to be heroes, they've got spandex and look the part and everything, but they seem to be a bit despised, and so it's a bit, people not frowned on by society, but sometimes, if the parents find out, their kid is a mutant, then there will be this stigma attached to it. So they can quite often have an adverse response, like Jubilee's mum there.
Yeah.
So I was just interested what you thought, because for me it's just like, all right, well, this is, it can go one or two ways, oh, we love you anyway, even though you're a mutant, or, can't you try not being a mutant, I think was the line out of X3.
Yeah.
It just jumped into my mind. So, and there's a lot of parallels to that in stigmas in the real world, isn't there? So, but yeah, so Jubilee's mum not happy at all, and then we get one of the biggest pop culture references that that just immediately plant this right in the 90s, don't we? Because Emma Frost and Banshee turn up, and Officer Hootie and the Blowfish. Oh, no, just Hootie and Blowfish.
Yeah.
It was one of those where they said that, and I was just like, you know, when you just suck back on your teeth, you're like, oh, that's terrible.
Yeah.
That was pretty bad.
But Dave, what was even worse was Banshee's accent. I mean, I don't know whether he is Irish, but oh my word! Talk about being miscast. He was a terrible. Oh, he's. I can't.
He's definitely not Irish.
No, I just can't. I can't comprehend. It's like he's watched The Commitments a couple of times and then gone, right, I've got my Irish accent, and
nailed it.
Oh, it's just awful. I mean, what gets me?
Calm down, you harpies.
Yeah, exactly. But I know we've gone into obviously talking about the police station, but when she comes and wakes him up, she says to him, "Wake up, lover. I'm even better in real life." And I'm like, oh,
a little bit weird.
Yeah, I was like, oh my word. But this is obviously weird at the scene after that, and we get the whole thing where they rescue him, and somehow they've got these sort of DEA uniforms on to the actual police, haven't they? Who just released them, and they've sort of this mind control thing has worked a bit like the Professor X type.
Yeah. So Emma Frost's powers or original powers at least, are all around being a telepath and you know, a very powerful one. So if you think basically Professor X but female with a wig.
Yeah.
Then you're pretty much there. She did have a kind of secondary mutation introduced years later, so you know she can turn into Diamond, which we saw in X-Men First Class. But here we just get a bit of the Jedi mind tricks, isn't it? You know,
yeah.
And we see it again later in the movie, and that's how they get out, and that's when they're coming out of the police station. We see, you know, we're looking for the Hoff, aren't we?
Yeah, both of us said it, didn't we? We both messaged each other.
And it's funny because depending on where you place the camera and the lighting and everything, you can make the same set and the same location look quite different, can't you? But it seemed like the camera was almost in the same place as when we saw it in Nick Fury.
Even the lights, I think even the lights outside, they sort of turn green at one point in this sort of meeting they've got going down. And I was just expecting them to jump into the subway like they did Nick Fury, because it was just, honestly, you know, obviously we talk about this, and we're not actually at the mansion yet at this point in the film, but that whole scene in the mansion, you can get away with that because it's set within the same sort of universe. But there was no forgiveness for what they were doing. I mean, this was done obviously before Nick Fury, but obviously Nick Fury just ripped that. They weren't even bothered where it went. I mean, then again, had a lot of people watch this Generation X up to this point. I'm doubting whether anyone had actually seen it. So yeah, I don't think it'd be
more steps in the US, though, mustn't there?
Well, actually, David, it's Berlin, if you don't mind.
You can just film outside, but seemingly not.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what I'm saying. It's Berlin, if you don't mind, David. Nick Fury.
Oh yeah, of course. But yeah, so obviously they come out of the police station. There's a bit of a back and forth, isn't there? You know, Jubilee's not quite sure whether she wants to go with them or not. And then I'm trying to think back now. Doesn't Emma play some mind tricks or something on Jubilee's mum?
I can't. I must admit, I didn't pick up on that as she did, Dave. I genuinely didn't.
I'm trying. Yeah. Let's skip past that. I'm not watching it again to verify.
I'll be honest with you. I don't care if she didn't.
But so after she goes there, so we get into the mansion.
Yeah.
You know, it looks very much like a studio.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I guess, you know, an 80s or 90s reason, Jubilee needs to get scanned, and she needs to take her top off to get scanned.
Yeah. I was a bit uncomfortable with this. Isn't she supposed to be around about 15, 16? And
they're all kind of in and around that age, and it struck me. I mean, it just seemed highly inappropriate. And of course, you know, she says, so after the scan, And that bit of humiliation there, she sort of says to Skin, you're next. But the camera doesn't, we don't need to see that.
No.
So, yeah, it was a little bit uncomfortable viewing that bit, I must admit.
Yeah, and I think as well around about this time in the film, I mean, I put that like you as a parent as well, and not just because, I've got a daughter who's 17, you've got children who are younger, but I just thought, this isn't right. Even in the 90s, you couldn't have said, like, so you need to, it'll be over in a minute. You can't say stuff like that because they're supposed to be like kids, aren't they? Which I just found really bizarre. But then what starts happening at this point, Dave, is you started getting little bits of swearing introduced in the film. And I'll be honest with you, I can swear with the best of them, and I've tried my hardest not to swear in this podcast because I don't want to for what we're doing. In my other podcast, it's terrible. But they just were dropping one-liners, little swear words in for no reason. I don't know if they were trying to make it a bit more gritty, but it just didn't fit. Sometimes in a film it fits, doesn't it? And you can understand what they're going, like a gangster film or something like this. But I thought they're playing this sort of game of we get to the next scene after they've obviously got this scan and they get introduced to the rest of the clan, don't they, really?
Yeah, so they get to meet the other students, don't we? And then there's some clunky dialogue, where they're talking about, well, what powers have you got? And I can do this and I can do that, so so we meet Monet, don't we? We meet Mondo, Buff and Refrax, and they're playing a little game of football there. And it's very clear they're getting the new kids treatment, aren't they? So they're not terribly popular at all. But Skin gets into the game, gets some skin in the game, and then they have a bit of a ruckus. And then I think if I was to say, and it's a hard list, but if you were to say what are your top 3 favourite moments, so they get into a bit of a ruck, don't they, the kids, bit of fighting, and Banshee decides then to use his powers to break it up. And they, so he gives his sonic boom, and the kids don't really move at all. But you can see the visual effects, that these sound waves are generated. And then he just blows on his fingers as if they're guns, and then just goes to put them in his holsters.
Yeah.
And it was just like, what the hell?
Yeah.
You thought, I'll tell you what would be good.
Bit of Clint Eastwood.
This will be great if he does that. Just shoot him with the old fingers.
Let's be honest, Dave. It wasn't. This. I mean, the more at this point, we're about 25 minutes into the film, half an hour into the film, and then genuinely, again, I've said this when I watched like Nick Fury and. I was literally this was becoming a grind that I've ever seen with a film, because even for a TV adaptation, I was thinking surely there's got to be more. I was a massive fan of Smallville, the Superman Origins TV show following Clark Kent. I watched it from the start, and yeah, you got the odd episode where it was a bit hit and miss, but it was believable as a character. And I know it's obviously that was a long running TV series that went for over 100 episodes, but this was it's like again, like I've said a few times, it was like the director and just didn't understand what it meant for it to be a comic book and how you're supposed to adapt it to TV. And this was just, at this point, I was thinking they're just throwing things in for fun here just to see if it works.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think, well, let's hold on to that thought because and let's go into the out and about around town kind of scene, because we'll come back to that, because they kind of convince Banshee, don't they, that we've got licenses, let's take the car and we'll go into town. And so, they're in the kind of cafe / diner, aren't they? And then, kind of weird scene where Mondo's like challenging this jock sort of character to a drink off with a milkshake.
Like you do.
What the? That's a bit strange. And then he's got eyes for this local girl, give her some stuff, and and probably what is supposed to be a boyfriend, probably, takes exception to that and ends up inviting him over, and then shoves his head in a banana split. But this whole thing, I think I mentioned before, Grease too. This whole scene for me was just, it's like it was written for the 50s.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, this is the 90s. This is the mid-90s. And you're supposed to be, supposed to have that meta-awareness of what Generation X is, in this MTV generation. And they're chugging milkshakes and shoving faces in banana splits. It's not that I think actually that probably did happen in the 50s, but that idea of kind of it being written as if it was a scene out of Grease 2 or something.
Yeah, I think I got two things out of it. One was there was a slight comparison to Back to the Future. Obviously, that is set in the 50s. And then two, it was almost a scene and as well delivered and acted as what you would have saw in Happy Days, where the Fonz comes and saves the day. I mean, obviously in this scene, nobody saves the day. They just sort of look, they don't really help Skin or anything, but it's just, but Dave, let's just before, obviously, I know we've gone on about this scene because it is ridiculous, but slightly before that is something we both touched on, is the scene where we get, and forgive me, who's the girl who won't like take her clothes off and that, the blonde girl, what's she called?
Buff. Yeah, okay, I forget that name, Buff.
And we get this scene where this girl obviously is about a size UK 8.
Oh, was that before, was it?
Just before it.
I forget that bit.
And she's getting changed in like this sort of shot. And she takes the top off and she's got the back of the biggest steroid-taking female like you would see on a body. And obviously, I was like my bodybuilding and that. And I'm thinking...
But it's the fact that it's a bloke. I mean, we say about it. So she takes the top off, doesn't she? And all throughout the movie, she's been wearing the baggy sweaters. But you've got eyes. You can see that she's got a baggy sweater, but you can see that she's a young woman underneath that.
Yeah.
But when she takes off, you see just a second or two, don't you? And she's trying something on in the changing rooms, and Jubilee walks in by accident, and you see it's basically, I don't know, Arnold Schwarzenegger or Lou Ferrigno. The back is absolutely huge, and I couldn't help but think, just get a female bodybuilder. You can tell. It was so obvious that it was a bloke and a bodybuilder bloke's back with a wig on.
Yeah.
I talked before about my top 3 moments. I think that's number 1 for me. It was just so bad. And the fact that, all movies go through various editing, loops. There's the initial, when you're shooting the scene, I guess, you look back and you see, well, how does that look? Oh no, we need to maybe shoot it again. And then there's all kind of reviews and approvals that you got to go through. And how that got through is beyond me, because that is atrocious, that bit.
Yeah, I mean, there's some terrible dialogue, Dave, as well. And there's a couple of bits of dialogue I won't even say in the podcast, because it's actually, we'd have to change it to an R rating thing, some of the things that get dropped in. I won't even go into it, but you'd have to watch it. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a real strange situation. And like you said, it's like something out of, you see it in Grease too, I think, more than the first Grease. You get this sort of, these daydream scenes in it, and that's what it feels like. You're just waiting for him to burst into song, I think, at some of these that little section. He didn't sit with the film at all.
Yeah.
Strange, a whole strange situation from there, to be honest.
Yeah, but I'm glad you pulled me back to that bit, because I think that was the number 1 worst, but for me, best scene in the whole movie.
Yeah.
But, so yeah, and what's clear from that diner scene as well is, Skin is still getting the new kid treatment, isn't he? So the other guys, Mondo and Refrax, they're doing nothing to actually help him out there.
Yeah.
And we go to Dr. Russell Tresh, and he's kind of pitching to a board what it looks like about his whole dream web idea, and they're understandably a bit reserved about that. But we start to get the impression that this guy won't be stopped at anything. So one of his vocal one of the guys who really doesn't want to back him, essentially, he invades his dreams and takes him on a little sleepwalk, and then sleepwalks him right off the edge of a building there. So at this stage, I'm just thinking Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, Dave, I swear to you, I went that bit on my notes, and it's the first thing I thought. I mean, I hated Nightmare on Elm Street as a kid. I was absolutely petrified. One of my best friends used to make me watch it, and as about a 10, 11-year-old kid, I was absolutely petrified of Freddy Krueger. But this whole thing that goes on, and he's wearing like a sort of pink red suit, and all the others are wearing sort of normal black and neutral coloured suits, so it all sort of stands out that he's obviously supposed to be this maverick nut job. And I was the one thing I wanted to ask you, because we haven't spoke about this other than when we're reviewing it now, but is any of this even relevant to the comic, what's going on? Because it was just purely a Nightmare on Elm Street parody.
Yeah. Jim Carrey featured in Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah. And this is when he goes more Jim Carrey. I mean, he's even got like a Riddler outfit on. The suit's pretty much, if you had made it green, it'd just be the Riddler out of Batman. It was just,
yeah.
I mean, Dave, I won't even say what I said, but I just said, this guy's Jim Carrey impression, he is a W, because I was getting fed up of seeing it. I thought, look.
What are the Americans, a J?
Yeah, Jay, yeah. And it's got an off at the end. But yeah, it was just for me ridiculous, and it was really grating on me now. I know we said this a few times when things grate on some of these films review, but I was getting sick of it. I was thinking, come on now, there's got to be more to this than just a pure Jim Carrey parody. Come on, you know what I mean? We're like nearly an hour into the film, and it was just about 45 minutes into the film, and then he does this thing, doesn't he, where he's supposed to have gone into their minds and says to them, at a certain time now, you'll all have an episode, and we end up with them all sort of breaking wind round a table. And I'm thinking, oh no.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was like, no.
That's A material, that. And when he's in the dream web as well, he keeps bumping into people. We saw him bump into Jubilee at the arcade, and bumps into Jubilee because, so Jubilee and Skin, they've obviously stumbled across Cerebro. I didn't pick up. I don't think they mentioned Cerebro. They might have done, but I was half asleep, possibly. But I think that's what it's supposed to be. And Skin is obviously quite a smart chap when it comes to technology, so he's got it all figured out. But they just bump into him in the dream web. For the 7 billion people that are on the planet, just happens to bump into those guys, and so. Yeah, again, stretching that believability a little bit.
Well, Dave, we were saying earlier, obviously, 2 of the characters got changed because they didn't have the budget for the special effects, and that, as you know, from the comic book origins. Well, also at this point, when we've got Skin sat at the computer and he's got this supposed sort of V-shaped keyboard, like it's a snazzy technological keyboard, because probably around 96 we'd never seen that. But you and me were both in a band, I don't know if anyone knows this, and basically what he's using there is a mixing desk that you would have in any recording studio that we used to carry around. Yes, yeah. And it's like, look, if you're going to make it believable, at least put some bits of metal over it or make the dials slightly different. They just basically took a Yamaha mixing desk that you would find at any music shop, and he sat there just going up and down. I don't know if he's putting reverb or gain on what he was doing, but it was just so rubbish. I was thinking, come on, please, give us a bit more than this.
Yeah, but I mean, he sort of freaks... So Treshy, he freaks Jubilee out, doesn't he? But Armando, Skinny, he doesn't seem to have a problem with him, and seems quite become with the idea that he can help him win the affections of this girl. So he seems all right with him. this invasiveness of people's dreams. So, but yeah, we can see again Jim Carrey on steroids appearing in Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah.
So we move on to the fairground scene, don't we? So after, and this girl that Skin's got eyes for, she kind of sees him and she's thinking, oh, I know this guy. But they end up, cutting it short here. The team end up getting into a bit of a scrap again, don't they? Whereas unlike the diner scene, we see them banding together a little bit because Skin's getting picked on there. But, Mondo, so we get to see his powers, don't we? So he picks up a rock, absorbs the rock, so it makes his skin all the texture and density of the rock. And then that's quite handy if you're getting into a fight, obviously. But they end up in this scrap and end up in prison. And then again, just to know that we're fully in the 80s. Sorry, not the 80s. To know that we're fully in the 90s, we're getting some more pop culture references, don't we? It's like, that's Eddie Vedder, obviously the Pearl Jam singer, that's Eddie Van Halen. Again, just silly little pop culture references where I don't think they had to be in there. They obviously thought they were pretty clever at the time, but for me, it just dates it a little bit. But so so they get busted with some Jedi mind tricks again from Emma. But then she's pretty ticked off, isn't she? And actually, I don't know if you picked up on the dialogue, but when she's giving the kids a bit of a ticking off there, she mentions about camps, and the fact that you could end up in camps. So again, just another little hint there that, being a mutant in this world, it isn't necessarily fun, and you could get taken off to these mutant camps. But she's all for expelling them. And they pull a bit of a Spartacus, don't they? Because, Mondo owns up to the fact that he used his powers outside the school to, as part of this fight. And so she says, right, you're expelled. And then one by one, they all sort of stand up, I'm Spartacus. And she's like, right, fine, then you're all expelled then. And then I thought, so Banshee pulls off that move. He may as well have just patted her on the head, really. He says, give us a moment, kids, and I'll discuss your punishments with Emma. So completely undermines Emma Frost. And in the comics, I mean, I just couldn't see that would happen. He wasn't there. But so obviously he convinces her that, you can't really have a school with no students. And that I don't know if you picked up on this dialogue, but quite subtle. And again, I guess you're not if you're not coming from the comics, but he mentions about the Hellions. Yeah, did you hear that?
Oh no.
So he says, you can't blame yourself for the Hellions, and she says, well, I can't help but feel if I'd have trained them better, they might still be alive now. So that is from the comics. So she had a little group, and they were kind of rivals to the New Mutants. The Hellions, and they ended up getting killed, and that was part of her journey onto walking on the good side, if you like. So just a little bit of dialogue. I did like that. I guess the little fanboy in me is like, ooh,
yeah,
a real reference that's not Hootie and the Blowfish. So yeah, no. So they're not expelled, obviously, or else that'd be the end of the movie.
No, I mean, obviously, from the next scene, Skin is obviously in this chair again, and he's in sort of dream world, and we get this absolutely horrendous dream scene, and he's dancing, and it's like something out of the Jungle Book, and it's just honestly, I mean, obviously, the girl is dreaming. And he's got this thing, and she's, it keeps panning to her in bed, and she's smiling, and he's obviously in her mind and stuff. And I was really thinking, what is going on? Because, like I said, there was bits of dialogue where there's a lot of swearing, then these couple of little bits that look quite serious, and then you're getting this sort of, I don't know what it was. It was. I just didn't know.
It's a mix of a movie in terms of tone, isn't it? I mean, that has to be up there with one of the worst things I've ever seen on television ever. I think it was just awful. That old dancing thing. It was like, what is going on?
Yeah.
So just very weird.
And then the next scene is he gets out of the chair, she's there, and he goes back in, and obviously Dr. Russell's there, but he says a line, Dave. I'm thinking we'd already had this inappropriate section earlier where they're getting Jubilee to sort of take her clothes off as a 15-year-old kid, say, roughly that's what we're guessing her age is. He then says to sort of Skin to blackmail him, I'm going to mind rape your sister. And it's like, well, she's about 12 or 13. Yeah. It's surely, I know it's fat. She was a little kid or whatever, but I'm thinking surely you should even put that in the film. I just didn't get that at all.
It was a bit much, wasn't it? And it's not like... it's not like an 18-year-old playing a 15-year-old. She looked like she was about 12, like actually 12.
Yeah.
And it was just very, very wrong.
Yeah.
And again, I'm thinking, crikey, were the 90s like that?
Yeah.
Surely not.
Yeah. I was the same. I really did. It was... There's not many things in a film can disturb me and sort of shock me, where you're thinking, did I really hear that? We've all seen films of all different genres, horror, we've seen some of those violent films where you get, stuff like Death Wish in the 70s, and it's all about based on, there's all sorts of stuff going on there. But, oh my word, Dave, that really got me. And I kept thinking, surely that hasn't been in. And I'm thinking, well, has he got another sister that he's going on about? He's an adult or something, I don't know. I know it's supposed to depict this Dr. Russell as a raging lunatic. I'm thinking that's just sort of not right at all. Not right.
Again, just for the tone of the rest of the movie where they're chugging milkshakes and pushing each other's faces in banana splits, it doesn't sit quite right, does it?
No.
So, but that was another quite uncomfortable bit, probably the most uncomfortable bit for me, at least in that scene. I did we actually mention about so Tresh had actually he got trapped in the dream web, hadn't he?
Oh, yeah.
So somehow, and I didn't quite pick up. So after the guy, the chairman of the board or whatever he was, his vocal guy who was against all of his plans when he committed or when he slept walk off the edge of the building, they somehow tied it back. I guess it probably wouldn't have been that much of a leap, would it? He's just made the pitch, so you've got 10 other people saying he's probably done that. But anyway, so they unhook him from the machine, and that's where he gets trapped away from his body and trapped in the dream web. So yeah, he's trying to blackmail Skin, isn't he, so that he can get back to his body and back into the real world.
Yeah.
But yeah, after that uncomfortable scene, so Skin ends up getting him back into his body, doesn't he? And of course, Tresh, the old double cross. So he's now got Skin, and he's like, keeping him prisoner, and he wants. So going back to that opening scene on the movie where he's trying to drill into someone's brain to get hold of this particular cell or whatever he's trying to get from the brain. So he's going to do that to Skin, and it did make me laugh a little bit. I think, part of me was laughing and part of me was wincing. Again, because Matt Frew is just channeling Jim Carrey, so everything is mannerisms and everything. But I did like the line where he's like, I've really got to say this. I really hate your hair.
Yeah. I've written that down. That's the only line that made me laugh. And then there's another line where he says to him as well, he says, have you been circumcised? And I'm like...
Oh, yeah, where he gets the blade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, he says, obviously, when he wakes him up, this is just before this, he gets the dreams skate thing on him, and he says, I liked it so much I bought the company, the old Victor Kiam adverts, if anyone remembers them from the 80s, the Remington shaver it was a big advert, but that was quite a nice little line. I did like that, but yeah, that was the only line that I really hate your hair sort of thing. I thought that was funny. It was the only thing that I sort of half laughed at.
Yeah, and it was his delivery, wasn't it? It was the pause. You think, what's he going to say? And then, he delivers it. So I thought that was genuinely mildly funny.
But it didn't make sense, though, because obviously he's not a mutant, but he then captures Skin and just puts him in the sort of dream skate in the chair and that. And you're thinking, well, he's got this Skin sort of thing where he can, move, he can deform his body. Why can't he get out of that chair, or why can't he do something? It just, I couldn't work out what the logical reason was for him to...
Sloppy writing.
Well, yeah. It just made...
I think if you try and rationalise it for more than a second, it kind of breaks down a little bit. But yeah, that's all. Well, it gets weirder, doesn't it? Because so he's trapped up there, and then they decide to mount a rescue, all the rest of the team. And I kind of half lost what was going on here, but I got the impression. So I think Emma was talking about, she can mentally put them all into the dream web.
Yeah.
But she can't take part in the showdown because she's concentrated on keeping all them in this dream space or dream web or whatever. But when they're taking on Tresh, they've all just got the same powers as their physical mutations. So I'm like, what's going on? I was trying to figure out, are they in the dream space? Are they in the real world? What's going on?
I didn't have a clue, Dave.
I think they were in the dream space, but they just had the same powers as their physical bodies. Because I think for the first few seconds, I'm kind of thinking, well, how is Tresh got a prayer? He's just a normal bloke. He's a mad scientist, isn't he? You've got Mondo, who can turn himself into rock, into steel, into anything. Like you say, he got skin. He can, stretch his skin, wrap him up, like Mr. Fantastic or something. You got Buff, just drop kick him. You got all these different mutants who could on their own take him out.
Yeah.
But he's kind of, holding his own. So that's when it triggered. I thought, maybe because they're in the dream web, he's kind of really powerful in there. But it still didn't make sense. But at this point, again, I'm thinking Nightmare on Elm Street 3. Is it the Dream Warriors where they kind of gang up and have a bit of a go at
against Freddy Krueger? Yeah.
It just screamed of that to me.
Well, actually, Dave, I'll be honest with you. It screamed a word beginning with S and ending in T, but we won't go into what's in between, will we? But it was just. I'm sorry. I know, obviously, people can probably get by how we've reviewed this, but I didn't even care again. I know I said it last week about Batman, and the more I watch this film, Dave, and we are drawing towards the end of the conclusion of it, I was thinking I have totally misreviewed Batman and Nick Fury, if I'm being honest. We'll get into that at the end, but I just...
You put Black Panther in the Hall of Justice as well. Let's come back to that one. Well, let's meander on to the end then. So, again, we get this fighting again. It's not really making that much sense, and you get the impression for a moment you think maybe Emma's going to be trapped in there, and then Skin out of nowhere. He's been our point of view character, hasn't he, all the way through the movie, and then he does this weird, again, Mr. Fantastic thing where he's just stretching round Matt through it. Tresh has been, borderline omnipotent in the previous few seconds, but Skin can actually, and again, when it's all in the dream web, he can just wrap himself around Tresh a few times and then, disappear off the edge of a cliff. on this dreamscape, and you're like, what? What's going on? And then for a few seconds you think, oh no, Skin's gone. I didn't really care about him, but he's gone, you know. And then the hand comes up, and you're like, oh right, he's not gone. It's like,
I love that, Dave. I love that. He's gone, but we don't really care. That's right. Because, and then obviously he comes back like Lazarus, and he makes his return on the edge, and they're all like, "Wow, it's amazing." But what gets me, Dave, as they're going through the sort of the wall, or this sort of, I don't know what it's supposed to be, whether it's supposed to be like a portal or something back to reality, to make it look even worse than it's just a piece of scenery cut out to make it look like a portal. The Irish guy, Banshee, who's been absolutely useless, he grabs the wall, and I'm like, oh no, he actually grabs the scene, which is the portal, and I'm thinking it's supposed to be this sort of, they give up at this point because all the smoke and the white sort of background to make it look like it's a portal in a wall and stuff, very Dungeons and Dragons like. They've just given up and gone, now it's just a bit of cardboard really, just go through it, and we'll just end the film now, let's just put out the misery.
We've had enough.
And I'd had enough at that point. And then you've picked up on the net. One of the, which is a classic, Dave, is Buff at the end. We've obviously gone to the end. Everyone's safe. Everyone's back at the mansion, and then we get this scene with Buff. Dave, go on, you take that one away.
So again, we'd seen it earlier in the movie, hadn't we? That Buff with a baggy jumper on. You know, but she's very clearly, womanly, and then she turns up in what I think is supposed to be a wow. We get to see the uniforms at the end there, so we get a big red uniform, and it is quite similar to the Gen X uniforms there, with the big flashing red X belt. But she's just very clearly not that bodybuilder bloke that we saw earlier in the scene. So what confused me, I mean, it's the old, sort of 70s and 80s lycra suit sort of job.
Yeah.
What I couldn't fathom is, especially, in the 80s, you had all the shoulder pads and everything. Even if they just stuck a couple of shoulder pads on her, to make her shoulders look bigger or something, it's like, what are you doing? You've stuck her in lycra. She's supposed to be this muscly brute, and she's embarrassed. She's ashamed of herself. But you can just see it's just not the case. And so I just thought that was really lazy. And like I say, you're supposed to be thinking, oh, look at that. The X-Men suit. Hooray. And it just fell flat for me. Yeah,
it was strange. It was really...
I tell you what I thought, again, movies, I think they go through all these kind of reviews and approvals and whatever before they actually hit the screens, or maybe for TV movies, it just hits the air and no one's seen it, and the producers and everything are like, oh my God, is that what I paid for?
Yeah.
But it did cross my mind that someone was... someone in authority was watching that and thinking, right, the next X-Men movie, leather suits it is. And I genuinely wondered, did that have an influence on the suits that we saw in the 2000 X-Men movie? Because it was pretty bad.
It was... I'm not, me, Dave, I can talk a glass eye to sleep, as the old cliche says. I am actually lost for words at this point with this whole film, because I really, I don't get it. I don't get the whole thing. I mean, they put this sort of pumped up suit on her from nowhere, saying like, she's happy with her body and that great, no problem. But like you said, the continuity at this point just gone completely. There was no logical or reasonable explanation for what is actually going on at this point. It was just like, right, let's get to the credits. Everyone goes home smiling. The heroes win. We get this half thing that Dr. Russell may come back if they make a second. And at this point, I'm thinking, thank God they don't. And he's sort of blinking in bed. And I don't know. I just don't know what to say. I really don't.
Well, let's get into the wrap up.
Yeah.
So, I think as well. So I'll let you go first. But what I will say is, I think with some of the other movies, actually no, we hadn't seen Nick Fury, had we? We kind of watched that out of context, out of the time.
Yeah.
And I mentioned, I think, at the top that I don't think this got a UK release, so we hadn't seen it in the 90s nor the 2000s. We're watching it in 2018, and we don't have that nostalgia that, when we were watching Batman last week, we kind of had that nostalgia as well, when Joker would say certain lines or Batman would say certain lines. You remember what it was like watching it as a kid. And I remember, being a kid and around this mid-90s time, I think I'd have just gobbled up anything that was around this whole genre.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I think even if I had have done that, I'd have watched this and just been like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
Again, Matrix was out a few years from then. It just didn't stand up at all. So I probably said too much already, but I'll hand over to you to give us your score and your final thoughts there.
Well, I must admit, Dave, I've got to applaud you on Tuesday.
It's Asgard, isn't it?
No, it's Asda, is it? I must admit, Dave, I've got to give you full credit on the way you've picked, because Dave, if anyone is listening, I know I've said this a couple of times, but Dave actually has picked the show and sort of run of what we reviewed, and I'm quite happy to go with that. And not because we can change it, as we said. If we get some suggestions of people, we will sort of mess around with what we're going to do and things like that. But I've been great to go from sort of highs of lows, and this film, Dave, I honestly can't see there's going to be anything worse than this that you can throw at me. I really can't. I really can't. And the last couple of days, I've been really questioning how I have come to the review scores of the films we've already done. And I want to, before I give a score, I would like to give some amendment scores, if that's okay. Now, is that okay? I know that anyone who's listened to the previous podcasts, apologies.
You can't put everything, in relation to this. You can't put everything at the top of the scale.
No, I can't. But Nick Fury does not deserve to be sent to the Phantom Zone. So I want to send Nick Fury to Hell's Kitchen, without doubt. And I also want to send Batman to the Halls of Justice. But I'm not changing the Black Panther. I'm keeping that at the Halls of Justice as well until I watch it again. But them two, I would like to slightly move up, because this film does not deserve our review score. It is that bad. I mean it. I mean, it's a film that if you had people round, you could absolutely blag them and say, what a film I've watched. We've got to watch this film, just to see the reaction after about 10 minutes thinking, is he actually for real? Because it is quite truly the worst anything I've ever seen on TV. Anything. I'm irrespective of a film, and I've watched some terrible reality programs because I like reality stuff and that. Dave, it is just truly awful. From the minute we get that Jim Carrey pound shop lookalike, whatever he's trying to do, I just do not know. It's like he'd gone to the auditions and said, you know what, to his mates, I'm going to try and just play Jim Carrey and see if they cast me. And they casted him. And honestly, just for the sheer volume of the Jim Carrey stuff. And one thing that got me at the start was he does this little movement with he puts his hands there like he's got like a pencil or something through his head, and he moves his head dead quiet, like dead quickly. And it's just what Jim Carrey does and stuff like the mask and that. And I was thinking, surely Jim Carrey wanted to sue this guy for copyright infringement, because it's not even close to go. He sounds like him. He's even got the suits on that he wore in the mask. He's got like a yellow suit on at the end. He was a green face. And it was like, I just couldn't go past that. I just thought it's an absolute disgrace that the directors even allowed this. And I've read some of the reviews for people after I watched it saying that he was great. He chewed the scenes up, as we were saying, from on the last one, like the Hoff did in Nick Fury. And I'm thinking he didn't chew anything up. He might be a good actor, and like you said, he's in stuff like Honey, I Shrunk the Kid and things like that. And so I probably remember him in them because I remember as a kid watching it. But this, it's an absolutely awful, awful film. I cannot recommend this to anyone other than to wind someone up. So it's definitely got to go. Please, I want General Zod to come down, pick him up and take it to the Phantom Zone. It's the worst film I have ever seen, Dave. And I can't say any more than that. I really can't. And it's a disgrace. And I hold my hands up for the review scores I've previously given because I felt like we needed to add another sort of review score parameter there because it was that bad. It's below. If I'm going to keep Nick Fury, which I'm not, I've moved it up. I've had to move them up because of how bad this is. Nick Fury is a better film than this, and I don't care what IMDB says and Rotten Tomatoes. This is a truly awful film.
Yeah, so I was. I'm not going to disagree with anything you've said there. I do think Matt Frewer's performance is not good. It's a straight-up rip-off of Jim Carrey. But I think probably on balance, he probably was the best thing in the movie. But that's not to say it was good.
Totally agree.
Just, the best thing in a very bad bunch. And I was thinking as well, so if we do have new listeners out there, so we have a scale, so going from best to worst, we start up right on the top there in that hilly Asgard kind of area. Next best to that is Atlantis. Then we're in that middle section, we're in Hall of Justice. Then we get down into Hell's Kitchen, and then we get into the Phantom Zone. So for those truly terrible movies, just in our opinion, there could be other people who really like those things that we send there. But things that we think should be locked away in the Phantom Zone, that's where this was going. And I must admit, I was racking my brain to think, is there a location that is worse than the Phantom Zone? And the only thing I could think of was something like the Blob's posing pouch. Maybe you could send it there, but no, I think we'll keep it fairly, linear and just have that 5-point scale. So yeah, I think this was hard to watch. And again, because we hadn't watched it in the context of the time, maybe I'd have felt a bit different, but I kind of don't think I would. Even then, in the kind of mid-90s, I don't think I'd have thought any differently of this. It's just really not a good movie at all.
No.
And I'm just glad, so when we get onto X-Men in the 2000s, I think there's a lot of people who don't like those movies, and I think a lot of people kind of retrospectively beat up on them because of how they match up or don't match up with the Marvel movies. But if you compare, there's 4 years between this TV movie and, X-Men, it's just light years apart, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so I'm going to send it straight to the Phantom Zone as well. I can't. When I watched Nick Fury, and again, I think to be fair, the first 20, 30 minutes, I thought it was very similar to this. There was nothing really redeeming about it at all.
Yeah.
But then, for me at least, there was a switch that it put it into that so bad it's good category. Whereas this is, so bad it's just bad. And I just, unfortunately, I can't have much other than the odd laugh out loud thing, like say the terrible kind of the body double for Buff, the Banshee sort of using his powers on the kids and then blowing his fingers. It's just ridiculous moments, but it's not to recommend anyone sit through it. So listeners, if you've made it this far, unless you're, crikey, a sucker for punishment, I would probably just, avoid this one. Unless you're an absolute completionist or masochist, I'd stay clear.
Yeah, and I think as well, I'd listen to this podcast just for listening to me and Dave trying to make it sound interesting, because I think we've done quite a good job this week, because it truly is a war of attrition. And I know I'll probably cringe listening to the Nick Fury one again, because I'm going to have to go listen to what I said in that one again, Dave, because I've listened to it a couple of times, but I'm actually sat here with my head in my hands. I've watched it again as we're doing the podcast and skated over the bits as we've gone. And these obviously bits we've missed, and we've missed them on purpose. We've done more in-depth reviews because the films deserves more of our time, but this truly deserves no more than the hour and 27 that it was created in, because it's an absolute atrocious thing. And I think you come from the comic book side, Dave. For you, all I've got to go off is the film and maybe the odd sort of Easter egg of dropping, like Cerebro in there and things like that, because I'm watching the films. It must really grate on you more, because you're thinking the whole dream stuff was just straight out of the 1980s, Freddy Krueger, like we said. And you picked up on it. I've written it down myself when I watched it this week. You must think to yourself when it comes to these directs, like it's about David Goyer and that the artistic license. It's not even close to what you've even read or would have read.
Yeah, and again, if I'd have watched it at the time, maybe I'd have had those feelings. But it's so different, it's not even close enough to register on my scale, to be honest, to be upset. Like, oh, they got that wrong about the character or whatever. It's just like, what is this? All the way through, just thinking, oh gosh. Is it finished yet? No, 10 minutes in.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, well, I mean, it served a valuable purpose. This is the first step in the Fox X-Men universe. A painful step, gone over on our ankles. We have to pick up ourselves, dust ourselves off. But, it's the first step, and it possibly normalizes, some of our reviews as well going forward. So I do think that's probably down near the bottom end of the scale there.
I think that's going to be, and I don't think the only but the positive thing out of watching it is there truly cannot be any worse films that we will review. I mean that, Dave. I know I said it with Nick Fury, and you kept saying to me about Generation X. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I mean, clearly some people out there do enjoy it, because, like I said, I just had a quick look at IMDB before we started recording, and I think Nick Fury's 3 point something rated on there, and Generation X is 4 point something. So some people are, I mean, 4 to me is you're up around the midsection, aren't you? You're starting to get into, this is all right. It may not be for you, but it's all right for some people. Whereas I kind of think this is more, no, it's just not really right for anyone.
Because, like you said when we were reviewing it just then, it doesn't know what it is. I mean, 1 minute you've got some sort of 1950s love cliche scene. The next minute we've got, I'm trying not to say the word, but like he's saying he's going to do something to his sister and stuff. And and it's illegal what he's saying. And then you've got comments that are saying that, are you circumcised and all this, and you think, and then like I say, these random bits of swearing, like they were trying to justify maybe it was an R-rated TV film. I don't know. It must have been on after 9 o'clock or something, but it just didn't justify what it was doing. It was like it's a jack of all trades, master of none, because it was just nothing. I wouldn't even call it a comic book adaptation. I just call it a very poor. It's like watching Tales from the Crypt or something from like the 80s, where you'd stay up late and watch these weird. Each episode was slightly different, and you'd have ones where someone would be dreaming and be in a fantasy world, and at the end it was all a dream, or was it? Like that sort of thing. Like the Thriller, Michael Jackson Thriller video. I know that's a weird comparison, but you, by the end of the sort of whole 20-minute segment of this Thriller film, it's supposed to have been a dream, hasn't it? But then he turned around and is it a dream? And that's what I kept getting with this, thinking this is like a bad horror film but without any horror or any direction. Terrible. It was terrible. It's good. It's good for us because we can grind ourselves through these things. But let's do something better next week, Dave.
Yeah, I must admit, I was thinking after I'd rewatched this, and I am invested. I put my cards on the table earlier in the show, right at the top of the show. X-Men's definitely one of my favourite in comic book and in the TV movies. I'll just swallow it up. But even for me, this was hard. And I thought to myself, I'm gambling a bit this week. I might have lost Chris. I honestly thought you might say, "Look, I'm done. If you're going to subject me to this, I'm done. I'm out."
No, hey, I'd never do that. I'd never do that. But I must admit, knowing what they've got coming up for a schedule, I was looking at what we're coming up thinking, I can't go through another of these for at least a couple of weeks. Give me something. Because what I find is, but that's the whole point of reviewing it, Dave. We can't keep doing masterpieces, stuff like that. And obviously in the next couple of weeks, we are going to be reviewing a TV series in the same format as what we do. So we're having to put a bit more time into what we're reviewing because it's not just an hour and a half to 2 hour segment. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to condense it into a review of this length, like a 1.5 to 2 hour review. So it's a slightly different approach. So I'm looking forward to the challenge of how we both pick different bits out of what we come across and how we saw the series and stuff like that. So that's going to be a good challenge for it. And then obviously we will move on to the games. But no, you'll never lose me with stuff like that. But I was laughing to myself thinking, I'm not going to swear, but I was thinking that man, Dave, has just had me over here completely. I'm really trying not to swear. When we go off air, I'm going to swear at you, but I'm not doing it now.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Absolutely.
So, yeah, we've got like you say, we've got a good, quite iconic independent kind of movie or based on an independent comic coming up next week, and then a series. And then, of course, getting on towards the end of April, we're going to be discussing there's a small little Avengers movie coming out. So I imagine that one will not be Generation X. So I think we've had our penance, and we'll get into some better materials over the next few weeks, I think.
Yeah, but please also, it's on YouTube, so it's there for all to see. Some of the films reviewed are available on YouTube, but this one is. So just for sheer, even if you want to sort of run with the podcast, when we do these reviews, I have the film running in the background, and I know something that Dave, you're going to do down the line, and it just sort of helps for different cues with what, like Dave and myself have picked up in our notes, and it helps me remember then as well, especially if it's a film we've never seen before like this, and like Nick Fury, I'd never seen it before or anything like that, so I like to have it running there. But when we do the cinema stuff like Black Panther, that's all on memory and what you sort of picking up from researching. But if you want to see what we're saying about, please see Matt Frewer's performance as Jim Carrey, basically, because I don't think you're going to believe how much of a rip-off it is. That's the only reason I'd say to anybody to watch this film.
Yeah. Okay, good stuff. So both off to the Phantom Zone. I think that's the first time that's happened, hasn't it? We both unanimously said this is fairly atrocious. So off to the Phantom Zone you go.
I think that might be the only time you would have lost me, Dave, if you'd not sent it to the Phantom Zone.
Yeah. Found some redeeming qualities in it.
Yeah, brilliant.
So if you like what you hear, then go ahead, get onto iTunes, hit that subscribe button, and every time we release a new episode, you'll get that downloaded straight to your podcast catching device. And while you're there, if you could drop us a 5-star review, that'd be wonderful. We'll read it out on the show, and that just helps us grow the podcast a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Chris, have you got any plugs for us?
Yeah, I have, Dave, as always. I have my other podcast, which is going from strength to strength, actually. It's the Contextual Podcast. Please give me a follow on Twitter at the Contextual Pod 1 or at the Contextual Podcast, whichever account you find on there. Email me at thecontextualpodcast@gmail.com. And please, if you've got any sort of podcast hosting app, whether it be iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, various other ones that are out there, they're all like through Google. Come on, give it a listen. It is an adult rated podcast because I do swear a lot, which when you listen to this podcast and then you listen to my other one, you would actually probably think that doesn't really resonate with Chris, because I'm trying very hard not to be, especially with this one I've had to review this week. But it's a slightly different podcast, talking gaming, football, MMA, stuff like that, WWE. So give us a shout, and then and if there's any subjects you want to talk about gaming wise, or you want some information about upcoming games or pricing, I'm usually your man, because I can usually troll and I know all the best sites for parents and stuff like that if you want any games for the kids or for yourself. So give us a shout. What about yourself, Dave? What plugs have we got?
Yeah, so we recorded the latest episode of the Grassroots Coachcast, so that'll drop once I've had a chance to edit it and everything. That'll drop this weekend. So we were just talking around planning for practices and matches and what have you this week. So yeah, that's all good fun. So all around youth soccer coaching there, or youth football coaching. And so if you're into that sort of thing, then get over and have a listen to that one.
Yeah, and I'm a subscriber to your podcast. I haven't listened fully to last week's podcast, Dave, to be fair, but there's some of the ones that you've covered are great. There's stuff like with the Crazy Gang and the Gaza stuff, which is all runs parallel to the main topic. There's always this sort of retro rewind section, and genuinely it is good content. So please give Dave and Ben a listen and a subscribe, because it is worth it. And anyone who's either boy or girl who's played in any sort of football team at that age group, he's really interested and he's quite funny, really, because Jordan's 17 now, and she, even looking like going back 6-7 years since she's played football properly, and it just is exactly the same. Some of the stuff that you guys have to go through, and one of the episodes was regarding parents and how you tackle them. And I wasn't one of them parents that kicked off with the managers and that. I had the respect, but I know plenty of members of my family who manage, or my brother especially was always getting sent off for watching his lad play. So how you tackle that is admirable. So please give it a follow, because it is good content and it's up there every single week from Dave and Ben.
Cool. And Chris, if someone wants to email us, who would they email?
Now, obviously, there was a bit of confusion the other week, Dave, but we are available at comicsinmotionpodcast@gmail.com. That's comicsinmotionpodcast@gmail.com. Just give us a shout. We do get messages and emails off people, whether it be through sort of Twitter. Twitter's our main format, really, and social media platform that we're using, because we're finding that that's getting the most interaction with us, and people around the world are actually coming to us. So we're not really using Facebook at the moment unless there's a need for it. We have got a page up there, but we've not really done anything with it because we just don't feel we need to. And just thank you for everyone who's listened, subscribed, followed what we're doing, asked questions, corrected us on stuff we're not doing. We're going to keep the facts going. I must admit, Dave, next week's facts regarding this film are going to be interesting, because I think the first fact is going to be, now when we put the facts up, we usually put the name of the film, the year in brackets, and then afterwards we put facts, and then we go and we'll find and trawl facts and pictures and that. I honestly don't know where I'm going to start with this film, because all it's going to be is fact number 1, it's terrible. Fact number 2, Irish accent's terrible. Fact number 3, we don't know what's going on. Fact number 4, Jim Carrey. I don't
think I mentioned, actually. Well, here you go. So, terrible Irish accents. The guy who played Banshee was actually the same voice actor who did Banshee in the X-Men animated series.
Oh, did it?
Yeah. So they obviously thought, it's so good. That really sounds like an Irish accent. That does. I mean, there's so many Irish people in the US. I just don't get it. Why? But so there you go. There's one fact. I've got I've got a feeling, because normally we reach more for the media, don't we, and facts around that. So I think next week we're going to be more reaching into the comics facts. So
please.
Some stuff out there about Jubilee, popular character from the 90s, and not really been used too much. So here you go, another fact. So Jubilee's a vampire right now.
Right, okay.
So we'll get some stuff from the comics for the facts, I'm sure.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd say just before we finish is Jubilee is someone I remember from the night, because I was into the comic. I was into the actual TV comics of X-Men. Obviously, we all know Wolverine was nowhere near as tall as what Hugh Jackman was supposed to be in the films. But another one in the same vein as Jubilee, just going slightly off, who I absolutely love, is Remy LeBeau, which is...
another fantastic Cajun accent.
Oh, amazing. Well, they're supposed to be making...
animated series.
Exactly. They're supposed to be making the TV series of Gambit. And I know in Wolverine Origins, he's brilliant in it, the guy who plays. I really like his performance in that. So, again, like Jubilee, another underused character in the Marvel sort of universe. You've never been able to...
Come on,
Yeah. But in the cartoons, he was a big player in the X-Men, wasn't he? With Wolverine and stuff and Cyclops.
Oh, I mean, in the comics, he was pretty huge. I mean, He was that bad boy, and he was used a lot in the animated series. But I hadn't heard about the TV series. I thought for years it's been one of those development hell movies. But Channing Tatum's been linked with playing him for years. But I just worry, because I do think he's a decent enough actor, and I think by the time it actually hits the screens, it'll be too old.
yeah, it's true. You're very true. I always do it. It's just totally going off on the subject, but just with the Jubilee reference, I just thought it's quite relevant because I've read it this week. But yeah, and also if anyone's listening, if you've got any facts about this film, then I'm quite happy to hand over all the passwords and let you run it for this week. Because I don't know.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. But yeah, thanks, Dave. It's been a brilliant episode.
It's been emotional.
Oh, my word. As Mr. Vincent Jones once said, it's been emotional but fun as well, because I'm writing notes down and I wouldn't have watched this film ever, and I'll never watch it ever again. The only time, I said this about Nick Fury, but there's pretty much a certainty that if I had a choice and my life depended on it, I'd be watching Nick Fury all day long, because I just can't go back to this. It's absolutely terrible. But a great exercise in what we're trying to achieve on the Comics in Motion podcast, and for the listeners. And even if one person listening actually watches it, I'd love to know what they think of it. Are we correct? Is it just us overreacting because of the wealth of what like we expect, or how we review? Are we correct in that? I'd like at least one person to contact us this week and sort of just say, yeah, you're right or you're wrong. Do you know what I mean? So, and I'm not doing a poll, Dave, by the way, just in case.
If someone does watch it, just, you've been warned. So, okay, yeah, let's wrap up there then. It has been fun, and let's watch something we enjoy for next week.
Yeah, I'm just going to go upstairs and watch EastEnders, because that'll cheer me up more than them.
Yeah, go and watch The Revenant or something.
Yeah, that depressed me. But yeah, or Schindler's List or something. But no, thanks, Dave, and thanks again, everyone. And this has been episode 8 of the Comics in Motion podcast. I've been Chris Phelps, and see you later.
Cheers, guys. Take care now.
Officers Hootie and Blowfish with the Bureau of Mutant Affairs. We're here to transport the mutant to a rehabilitation center.
Guys, I'm feeling seriously omnipotent. Hang on a minute, honey. I'm just gonna get my Barry White album.
And when your power kicks in and you do look through my clothes, I will rip your head off and attach it to his butt.
Well, you're pretty good at beating up children.
Well, thank you so much. I I'm really just a beginner, but I know I can.
I can become as solid as anything I touch, man. Wood, rock, steel, it's all good.
What happens when you eat Jello, ese?
Man, you know I don't like Jello.
I know you don't like Jello. It was very funny.
I'm still big.
You're huge.
Yeah, I know.